As I made my morning stroll past our school's athletics hallway, I noticed an unexpected buzz of activity whirling around the head coach's office. I nudged some kids out of the way to see what all the fuss was about, and I noticed a new team roster had been pinned up on his door. What's that all about? I thought the cuts were finished. As I scanned the list of names, I froze in my tracks. Just a single name had been crossed off the team. It was me. Fast forward 4.5 years later, I walked off the court with tears rolling down my eyes. The same court my hero had began his own basketball legacy. Sadness about the end of an era flooded me, but I was grateful for the people who had got me there, and I had beat the odds, proving to myself that I was worthy. How on earth did I get from there to here? And what did Steve Nash have to do with it? What is up? Welcome back to Fondling Cardboard. I'm your host, Mike LaCusta, aka the Golf Card Collector, and administrator for the biggest Facebook group for the golf card community called Golf Cards and Memorabilia. Now, I have an unusual passion for trading cards, as they've meant so much in my life, from being a crutch of my childhood to curb loneliness as I transitioned through a dozen different homes and stages in my life, to becoming tokens of nostalgia today to enjoy and reflect on the past. And I believe our card sanctuaries can be a place to learn about ourselves as much as a place to occasionally escape the pressures of life. If you're listening to this, I assume you like sports cards too. So let's talk about cards. I often talk about golf cards since that's my main focus. And this week's actually exciting. The Hero World Challenge is this week. It's the return to action for a couple of golf stars in Tiger Woods and Will Zalatoris. Both of those guys haven't played since the Masters back in April, and they've both had surgeries and significant recovery this year. And I wish them both luck this week for the good of the hobby. Now, it looks like from the first round scores, it's going to be a long road for both of them. Will Zalatoris shot a 9 over par in his opening round to be sitting in dead last, and Tiger is sitting third from last. I think he's 3 over par. So I'll dive into their cards and their stories in next week's episode. But today, we get to dive into the world of basketball and the story of a young, impressionable Mike bumbling his way through sports and cards. But before I get into the story, today I need to say a huge thank you to a relevant partner of today's episode, which is Ship My Cards. Brian Wells, the owner, is a big Steve Nash fan, and I've connected with him through a deal I made in the worldwide Steve Nash Collectors Facebook group. His company, Ship My Cards, is a service I've used for a couple of years now, and it's been a lifeline for my collection. Ship My Cards is a USA mailing address for us international collectors, which adds low-cost domestic shipping as an option for your card purchases. More importantly, though, in my opinion, it's a hidden gem of unlocking new eBay listings that you otherwise wouldn't see. I'll get into that a bit later this episode in the Card of the Week Spotlight. But international and USA collectors alike can benefit from their Oregon location, which offers a shipping address to avoid sales tax, which can result in huge savings for large purchases. And the Ship My Cards does all of this without any sort of subscription. You just pay a few bucks for them to process each package, and once you've stockpiled some cards in their vault, they will ship the cards back to you whenever you're ready for them. And I've mentioned Ship My Cards several times in the past on the Fondling Cardboard podcast, as well as the Sports Card Strategy show. And I've even thought about doing an entire episode about the ins and outs of collecting with Ship My Cards, because of how much they've changed my hobby experience for the better. I know this probably sounds like an exaggeration, but I can assure you, these are my own words, and this is not a paid advertisement. And it helps that they're located in Arizona, where I spent a decent chunk of my childhood, and the owner, Brian Wells, is a Phoenix Suns fan. Now, Brian did a fantastic interview with Jeremy Lee on Sports Card Live earlier this week entitled The Unsung Hero of the Sports Card Hobby, and I encourage you to check it out. When I was in late elementary school, I used to hang out in the schoolyard after class was done because I didn't want to go home. I wanted to just hang out and play basketball, and I'd look for other kids who were sort of latchkey kids like I was. And that's where I really developed my love for basketball. At the time, it was really about playing the game. It was about being active, competing, passing the time. But being out in the schoolyard like that also exposed me to, some of the hooligans around the neighborhood and sort of had me develop this tendency to yearn for freedom. And at that age, when you don't have good role models around, you end up going down, in some cases, the wrong path. And for me, it was skateboarding, which I don't have anything at all against the sport or the activity of skateboarding. In fact, I quite like it. I have a lot of good memories of skateboarding, but it was hanging out at the skate park and the characters who would frequent the skate park, especially at odd hours of the day or odd hours of the night. And I ended up developing friendships and a bit of a crew, so to speak. And in the back of my mind, I don't know how to put this properly, so I'll just say what's on my mind. I thought I was better than those people that I was around, and I could admit that now because I know it wasn't right. I know I am not better than those people. In fact, everybody is somebody, and not everybody is afforded the same opportunity. And I wasn't a better person inherently. Rather, I realized that how well I was doing at school and my athletic abilities and all that, I realized I had potential to make better decisions and to do better things in those avenues. And that the only missing piece I had was the encouragement to make better decisions. And I thought it was cool. And that skateboarding it was something I could do on the side, and going out late at night and being around people doing drugs and things like that. I thought that it was an edgy scene that I could have my cake and eat it too. But I learned the hard way that you have to put in the work and grind and surround yourself by people who are going to lift you up and not bring you down. So when I look back at my first year of high school, which was 8th grade, where I lived in Canada, 8th grade to 12th grade is all in one school. And it was the day after Halloween, which was the 8th grade basketball team tryouts. And like an idiot, I was out partying basically on Halloween. And I mean, I don't know how much partying really in 8th grade can get up to her, but let's just say, there were firecrackers shooting around, and we were running around with our skateboards like hooligans. And it's not something I'm proud of, but it's kind of where my journey in athletics starts, because I stayed out too late, didn't set my alarm, and didn't have parents who would pay attention to my schedule and things that I needed to do. And so I ended up missing the first day of basketball tryouts because I was out late at night. And the coach had very explicitly said, if you miss either day of the tryouts, no matter how good you are or who you are not going to be making the team. And I was absolutely devastated when this happened. And so I did actually make the cut. Cut down from 60 kids trying out, and I made it down to, I think it was like 18 or 19. And so I thought, wow, maybe I'm in the clear. In fact, it was just, they really strung me along, because they made a cut down to 19, and then they cut 2 or 3 of my friends, and it was literally like 16 at this point. And I thought I had made it because I made it through 2 rounds of cuts, and I thought maybe they made an exception for me. And the following week, they posted the final team, and I was literally the last person. I was the last name to be taken off the list. So at that time, I didn't know who Steve Nash was. I just loved playing the sport. But without a dad or brother in the house watching sports, I never really had been introduced to following professional sports until later in life. Um, but I became obsessed with Steve Nash at that point in time because a friend of mine was playing in a youth basketball league, and it was called the Steve Nash Youth Basketball League. Because for those of you who don't know, Steve Nash is from British Columbia, Canada, and that's where I was living. In fact, this is a story for later, but he actually grew up on Vancouver Island, which is somewhere I lived for a few years, and it was one of my favorite places in the world. So he and I had this, I just felt like I had this connection to his roots as a Canadian boy growing up on this small, cold island, far from, the rest of the NBA. And so I joined this youth basketball league because I was cut from my high school team. And I mean, it wasn't a super competitive league, but it fostered my passion for basketball. And the funny part is, I actually went on a vacation that summer with my family to the Yukon, which is a territory in northern Canada. And I read the Steve Nash book. I mean, I know he's got lots of books, but I read one of his books then, and I just was fascinated by his determination, his dedication to not only basketball, but everything athletic. Like, he would become a soccer superstar if he just thought it would help with his basketball footwork. And at that time, I think, how old are you in eighth, ninth grade? So I was 13, 14 years old, something like that. And I remember wanting to write a letter to Steve Nash, inviting him to come fishing with me. And I ended up not writing him a letter because I was almost embarrassed about it. But I looked at him through that book almost as like a big brother or an uncle sort of figure, someone to teach me guidance and provide a positive male role model. And I was just, in terms of athletes, he was absolutely, to me, the pinnacle. And through looking up to Steve Nash as a role model, I went through this transformational change once I shifted my mindset from being cool and rebellious to head down, ass up, head down, butt up, get to work mentality, live life with humility, hard work, and acting with as much respect as I could. That's when things started to change for me. So after one season of playing in this Steve Nash Youth Basketball League, I rededicated myself to basketball. I was done with the skate park life and those friends. I signed up for a summer basketball camp in Phoenix, and there was this level of fostering young talent in the United States that we don't have as much in Canada. And I brought that back with me to the following fall, to my high school, and I ended up making it onto my high school's essentially third string team. So it was even one step below junior varsity, but to me it was wonderful because I had a chance to represent my school, and that meant everything to me. That year, Steve Nash went on to win the league MVP, and the following year he went back to back. And it was almost like there was this cosmic connection between me and Steve Nash that I know that he wasn't personally willing me to succeed, but that's how it felt. And so the following year, I did make the junior varsity team. And then for my 11th and 12th grades, I played senior basketball at my high school. And without his inspiration and motivation, I certainly never would have gotten there. Now, there's a lot of other people that played into it. My best friend, who I developed around that time, family members like my aunt and my grandfather. Certain coaches motivated me, but but I definitely give a large credit to Steve Nash. And missing that 8th grade basketball team was a massive disappointment to me at the time. But looking back, it probably played a big role in shifting me from a ne'er-do-well life of cockiness and lack of mentorship to gaining some humility and realizing the need for hard work, because things aren't always just handed to you. So Steve Nash, he was that pivotal moment for me, that driving force. His book inspired me into action. His youth basketball league gave me a place to commit my time and my energy rather than in the streets, and to develop the skills, teamwork, leadership, when I hadn't been afforded that opportunity elsewhere. And when I committed myself, I succeeded. Now, thank you for hanging in there for this long-winded story. And it comes to an ending at the Vancouver Agrodome, which is a building that you won't recognize because it doesn't exist anymore. Now, at the Agrodome, there was a wooden floor that I played on, which was the same floor that Steve Nash finished his high school career. And it just so happens that my senior year was the final season that was played not only on that wooden floor, but in the Agrodome building before it was demolished. It wasn't like a movie, my experience playing at the provincial championships at the Agrodome. I think I scored a single basket, if my memory is right. It was a flailing lob as I floated out of bounds, far from a proper shot, and it would have been exciting if the game had been meaningful, but we were trouncing the opponent in the first round. And I was just getting some garbage minutes. When we lost the next game and our season was over, it sunk in that my competitive basketball career was over. And a scene crossed my mind of what happened the previous year as a junior, and the look of despair that crossed all over the faces of my senior teammates as they faced the closing of this chapter. And back then, tears rolled down all of their faces. Even the captain, who had the biggest ego I've ever seen, a tough guy, even a bully at times. Even that guy was crying with a red puffy face cupped in both of his hands. And one of the guys put their shoulder into a locker and ripped the door off, just in a bout of frustration. And as I walked off the Agrodome court a year later, I untucked my jersey for the last time. It hit me like a wall of bricks. Tears welled up before I could even gather my stuff from the bench. And by the time we were in the locker room, all of us seniors were bawling, just like the guys from last year. And looking around at our younger friends, they were seeing and experiencing the same thing I saw the year before. And looking back at that now, it wasn't the loss that we were upset about. It was the end of the most important era of our lives up to that point. It meant something different to each of us. And it was the last time that a lot of us would play basketball at the top level. But to me, it was the end of a deeply important camaraderie full of rituals and traditions. Late night celebrations at Denny's, wearing our sweats and Letterman jackets to celebrate a win. Just like those scenes from Friday Night Lights, except without all the obsessive fans. But most of all, it hit me that I was saying goodbye to my brothers and my mentors and a group of guys who kept me away from loneliness and depression, drugs, and possibly even a life of crime, considering the direction that I had been heading. And I know it's a far stretch to say Steve Nash saved my life, but it's not a stretch to say he massively influenced my childhood and my high school days and my ability to experience connection and succeed in sports, to never give up. And when I look at my Steve Nash cards today, that's what I'm reminded of. The drive to work hard for what I want and what I believe in, and with gratitude for my high school basketball grind. And that's why I collect Steve Nash. Now, I realize this is a story of what I personally went through. Nobody will experience the exact same thing as I did. So I'll try to extract some more general lessons for you. In life, bust your ass going after what you want. Because the moment you become complacent and think you've made it, life will slap you back. For us collectors, personal significance is king. Stacking Slabs had a great message about this last week. Check out this quick clip.
I have no freaking idea how the investor crowd goes and digs into these guys and spends the kind of money they do with apathy. It makes zero sense to me. I'm willing to spend above and beyond when I have a connection and love a player, regardless of if they're someone from the past or someone who's making me smile every night of the week.
Brett also talked this week about the mega bid. And there's a bit of controversy going around with the mega bid these days. But when I think of it, it's a way to get one of my favorite cards in my collection. So one example is I put a max bid of $75 on a card and I won it for $7. And it happens to be a rare Steve Nash card. You might just look at that and think that I got a really good deal, but and I really do think I did. But it's more the fact that I'm willing to pay so much more than anybody else in the world, and that clearly identifies that this is a card for me. And that brings us to Card of the Week Spotlight. The Card of the Week Spotlight is the 2015 Panini Totally Certified Steve Nash Certified Imports Mirror. Now that's a mouthful. It is basically an insert set within Totally Certified 2015. And this is a series of cards with international players with their flag in the background. And in this case, Steve Nash is wearing his son's uniform with the Canadian maple leaf flag in the background. And I have this little bit of a sub-personal collection going on with Steve Nash cards that involve the Canadian flag. And I really appreciate that the league and manufacturers identifying him as a Canadian. He is a Canadian citizen, but he was born in South Africa. Not a lot of people know that. And he moved here at, I think, just a couple years old, something like that. Actually, funny enough, I never even thought of it, but that's another parallel I have with Steve. Because when my family was young, we were living in Phoenix, Arizona, and at 2 years old, I moved to Canada. So, yeah, wow, that's another thing that I have in common with Steve. Now, back to the cardboard itself, this is graded in a PSA slab, Gem Mint 10, and I told the story. I got this for $7 and obviously paid about $15 or $20 to get it graded. This is the kind of card I would never let this out of my hands. I mean, if somebody had a handful, like let's say $500 cash, I would consider it. And honestly, I don't know if I would let it go. I haven't looked up the population, but I don't imagine there's more than one. And it's just a card I might not be able to get back if I were to ever let it go. And this is something that I yearn for in my collecting journey. I yearn for cards that are super rare, super connected to me and my story, athletes I've always looked up to. Not a rookie that I'm hoping will do well. I have a couple of those in my collection. But this is a guy that will always be in the forefront of my mind when it comes to sports. And a stunning card. I've actually been looking for some kind of platinum mirrors totally certified card ever since there's a circle of guys on Instagram, actually Brett McGrath from Stacking Slabs is one of them, who really admire the certified set and the platinum mirrors, which kind of they have these raised surfaces, almost like a precious metal gem style. And so this is not one of those. This is, more traditional, just holographic style of card. But I was looking for a card to kind of participate in what this group that I admire really likes in their collection. And that is how I stumbled into this card. And it was on auction, starting bid of $7. And I ended up winning it for the starting bid. And if I could just do this more often, this sounds silly of me to say, because of course, if we could all just find the perfect card for each of us at auction more often and win it, we'd all be happier. And I get that. It's not exactly what I'm saying, though. What I'm saying is, if I could shift my focus away from the noise, as a hobby obsessive, as somebody who's checking eBay every day, managing a social media group, managing an Instagram page, running a weekly podcast about sports cards. Sports cards are always on my mind, and I feel almost like an obligation to always be buying sports cards, and I do. And it might not be an obligation as much as an impulse. And when I look at this card, it's a reminder that it's okay to hold out. I don't have to buy a card every day. I don't have to buy a card every week, because the joy I get from this card is way more than anything I've bought in the past week, month, maybe even year. I have bought some cool cards in the last year, so I may have to take that back. But when I look at this card, it makes me want to clean out my eBay saved searches for cards that I was a little gung-ho about a few months ago, and now I check them out from time to time, and I sort of hold out hope that some rare parallel or something might pop up with that saved search, but it might never, and it might just be something that takes up some real estate on my phone as I'm scrolling and takes up some of my attention every single day as I have to clear that search with, random common cards that might get flagged by it. So this card wants me to do better. It wants me to focus. So I don't have this scripted. Things just keep coming to me, but it blows my mind that a Steve Nash card makes me want to narrow myself down and work hard and focus, because that's exactly what he did for me as a teenager. That's exactly what I needed in order to take the next step in my basketball career after a giant step backwards from being cut from the team. So, wow. Normally I spend card of the week time talking about the aesthetics of the card, what it looks like, but you know what? I think I've told you the meaning of this card, and I'm going to throw this up on Instagram at Fondling Cardboard. And heck, I'll throw this on at the Golf Card Collector as well. And yeah, leave a comment and you can actually check out what the card looks like there. Oh, and I forgot to mention, this card is serial numbered out of 25, and it's the gold version. So that makes it 100% a steal for $7 plus shipping plus grading. And the other thing I forgot to mention is that the relation to Ship My Cards for this experience, aside from it being the Phoenix Suns and Steve Nash and the connection with Brian there, I would have never seen this card had I not been using Ship My Cards. Because by using the USA shipping address in my eBay settings, it opens up listings, auctions, etc. that are from sellers who aren't willing to ship outside of the USA. Now you'd think, why on earth would somebody not want to ship worldwide to get the biggest net they can? And especially for an auction, get the most number of eyes on your auction as you can. And it really just simply comes down to either ignorance or fear of packages getting damaged, lost through different postal services. There are people who have had bad experiences and are no longer willing to ship internationally. There are people who don't even realize that they can change that in their settings in the United States. Now, without coming across as a jerk to my American friends, a lot of Americans don't know there's a world outside of the United States. So, open your eyes, change your settings, be willing to work with us, those of us north of the border in Canada and all around the rest of the world. So once again, thank you, Ship My Cards, for helping me build my collection and exposing me to cards that I would otherwise never see. And let's launch into Collector's Corner. Now that I've talked about a Steve Nash card that I bought and will never leave my grasp, let's talk about some that I have let go recently. Now, a couple of these I have duplicates of. Otherwise, I would have never let them go. But I had I believe it's 2013 Precious Metal Gems, and he's wearing his University Santa Clara Broncos jersey. And it's the red PMG numbered out of 100. And it's an amazingly good looking card. And it's got the retro stylings from the late 90s. What is that, 97? When all the basketball PMGs were released. And I bought this card in an SGC 8.5 for just over a couple $100 US about a year ago. And I definitely plan on always keeping it. I kind of wanted to cross it over to a PSA slab because I liked the aesthetics of the red PMG with the red slab. And I ended up buying a raw copy of this card, which is sitting at Ship My Cards. So I don't have the card in my hands yet. I talked about a lot of the benefits with Ship My Cards. One annoyance is that I don't get the cards in my hand right away. I have to sit here, logging onto their website and looking at all the pictures of my cards as they're receiving them on my behalf. So you kind of shift from this regular mail days and excitement of getting a card every other day to everything is stockpiled at Ship My Cards, and then every month or couple months or whatever, you can ship it all back to you and you get a giant mail day. And what I like to do is take the big box of cards that Ship My Cards prepares for me and have a video recorded grand opening of a giant mess entanglement of grading submissions and cards I bought on eBay and trades that I made with other collectors who didn't want to ship to Canada and instead shipped it to my Ship My Cards account. And that big exciting grand opening it's worth it. It's just as good as the trickling dopamine hits you get from those everyday mail days. So I let go this PMG as well as his Bowman Rookie Refractor. That's a Chrome card, Bowman Chrome. And this is one that I have some regrets to. So the guy I sold it to, maybe you're listening, hold on to that card. Don't get rid of it right away because someday I may come back to you to try and get it. And now I do already have a second copy of this card. In fact, I have it in a PSA 9, which is a good grade for this card. And the one that I sold is some random no-name grading company. I think it's called Patriot Grading Service or something, PGS. And the reason it has sentimental value is that the day that my youngest was born, it was a scheduled C-section, and I rolled out of bed. We didn't have the panic and excitement of our firstborn with labor and everything that comes with that. We had this scheduled and planned out. So I roll out of bed casually, go do my morning bathroom visit, and get ready to start my coffee. And I open up eBay, and I'm flipping through my saved searches, and a Steve Nash Rookie Refractor pops up for $15 US. And I just looked at that and had a bit of a dilemma because I had told my wife, I'm not going to be messing with cards today. And I made a commitment to myself, just don't buy cards today. But then I convinced myself, you know what? I can just have that attitude when I get to the hospital. Okay? Just put your phone in the locker or in your bag when you get to the hospital. But hey, we're just sitting in the kitchen. So I smashed by it now. And the card, showed up at Ship My Cards, and a month later, once I decided to ship my stuff back home, I had this card that I had bought on the day my son was born. So, yeah, that one, if I had really thought through things, I might not have sold it. But this buyer ended up buying 3 Steve Nash cards from me, and this was just the second one. And so, to have it be part of a bigger deal kind of pushed it along. So, I guess I'm okay letting it go. And if you look back at my Instagram posts at the Golf Card Collector, you'll notice that there are actually a couple of pictures with my youngest with sports cards. And so this one actually might not be the most significant with regards to bringing that boy into the world. Our son went to the NICU, and I had brought a Tiger Woods card with me to the hospital, actually. And it was a 2021 Upper Deck Artifacts red parallel, serial numbered out of 249, which is one of my favorite Tiger Woods cards. It's not overly complicated, but it's also not a simple card. It's elegant. I think that's the best way to put it. It's elegant, and Tiger's wearing his Sunday red. It's a great picture of him, and the red parallel, meaning there's red in various other parts of the card. It's just a color match that works. And other collectors would tell you this is a sought after card. There's a guy named Justin Lee in the Golf Cards and Memorabilia group who's been trying to collect all of them. Like, I think he's up to 30 or 40 of them out of the 249. So, that's a pretty good percentage of all of them in the world. I've personally owned maybe 7 copies of the card, and I was snagging them whenever they'd pop up on eBay, and then every now and then I'd sell one for double what I bought it for, or throw one into a trade that really made it make sense for me. But the one that I had left, just one copy, I brought to the hospital, and my son was in the NICU, and he was doing fine. I was worried. My wife was worried, of course, because it's just the environment, all the machines and the wires connected to the kid, and the breathing tube, and all these different things. And you see other babies in the NICU who are obviously a lot worse off than what we're at. And you start to wonder, like, is that where he's heading? How long are we going to be here? And with all these thoughts crossing my mind, I executed what I had planned. I didn't plan for it to be stressful, but I brought the Tiger Woods card with me to the hospital to take a picture of Elwood, my son, with Eldrick Woods, Elwood. And by the way, I never planned that name out. We picked the name, and then a friend of mine texted me right away and said, haha, good one. You named it after Tiger. And I was like, oh, Stacy's going to be mad at me because, I just loved the name, and I'm a Blues Brothers fan. Anyways, so I got this picture, and I would say that's probably the most sentimental card for me with regards to that day that my son was born. So maybe I can let this Steve Nash card go. But hey, I'm okay with cards circling back. And this is going to be the third time I mentioned Brett at Stacking Slabs, but he even mentioned in one of his latest podcasts about the boomerang card. There's such thing as the world just sending you the exact same card back to you and repurchasing it, often at a higher price than what you paid for it. And Brian Wells at Ship My Cards had a great story about that. He's a Penny Hardaway collector, and he sold correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was a Prism Gold Penny Hardaway, and he sold it just before the pandemic for something like $150. And then the boom happened, and then the Gold Prism parade happened, where that became the sought-after card, and he ended up rebuying it a couple years later for $8,000. Can you imagine? Can you imagine liking a piece of cardboard so much? Not only that you would pay $8,000 for it, but that you would sell it for $150, change your mind, and rebuy it for $8,000. Kudos to you, Brian. That is the move of a true collector. I forgot to mention the third Steve Nash card. So it was a 97 Metal Universe card, graded PSA 8. And just the base card, but it's an awesome looking card with maple leaves in the background. Now, growing up, I bought Steve Nash rookie cards whenever I could, and any other cool looking Steve Nash cards. And even nowadays, I'm always looking for Steve Nash whenever I'm opening packs. I'm looking for Steve Nash on eBay, at card shows, social media pages. So you might ask, why am I selling? Now, obviously, I want to recoup some funds, buy some other cards. But more importantly, I have duplicates, and I'm starting to realize I can't hoard everything that I love. And to paraphrase Brett McGrath from Stacking Slabs for a fourth time in this episode, I swear, Brett, I'm not stalking you. Unless you have unlimited funds, you have to sell good cards to get good cards. As we approach the end of this episode, I am queuing up the quote of the day for you. And in fact, I believe in the last episode, there was 2 quotes of the day. Maybe it was 2 episodes ago. And that was kind of a bonus for you guys on Thanksgiving. Today, I'm going to one-up that and give you 3 quotes. But before I get there, I got to ask one more time. Like, subscribe, leave a comment or a rating on whatever platform you're listening on. I know it seems like such an insignificant thing for you to do, but for me, it's huge. It puts the show in front of others who I hope can like the show, listen, and it helps me keep growing, and it helps me keep doing this. So please. All right, here we go. The first quote. It's failure that gives you the proper perspective on success. And I loved this quote, and this is the one I wanted to use for this episode. And then I saw who it was from, and I decided I would throw it in, but it can't be my only quote. This is by Ellen DeGeneres. and so I'm just going to jump right into the second quote. Whenever you do a thing, act as if the whole world were watching. And this was from Thomas Jefferson, perhaps a bit more respectable. But it didn't quite get the message across for the episode. I love it. I love acting as if the whole world were watching because that made me think of buying the impulse purchases on eBay. If I had everybody watching and judging what I'm doing, I would almost be making every decision, like that Steve Nash certified mirror card. That, I would have a desk full of 20 or 30 of those, and I would be proud of my collection. But no, I've got a good 20 to 30% of my collection, if not more, of just kind of junk that, I liked at one point and it sort of fizzles out. So, when you're acting, do it wisely. Be smart about what you're doing, because that's what you would do if somebody was hanging out, hovering over your shoulder. But last but not least, this last quote hits home and perfectly summarizes what I experienced in high school basketball and what I learned from Steve Nash. And that is, success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. And this was from Winston Churchill. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to getting back with you next